Hi, my name is Rachel Lemcke. I am 29. I am an amateur hobbyist painter, and I'm here to tell you more about my art. I would best describe my art right now as going through a transition phase. Originally, I was focused on painting relatively pretty subjects that are not very controversial. Pretty flowers like orchids and birds, especially hummingbirds. And then my work started to incorporate some geometry with dried pressed flowers worked into geometric shapes like triangles. And then more recently, my work has started to take what I view as a much more permanent transition to more dramatic and controversial topics. One of my series I've started is about basically showing endangered animals and kind of highlighting the need to conserve them, because how would we represent them when they're gone? And another series highlights kind of the plights that some people, especially women, face in terms of society's lack of empathy sometimes. So like one of my pieces features missing and murdered Indigenous Canadian women. So it's a really not subtle piece, but it's meant to encourage conversation as to why there's such an epidemic. I originally got into painting as a hobby to not only give me something to do with spare time and with the outcome of pretty things like paintings of hummingbirds, but also as a way to create meaningful gifts for people I cared about. So apart from elementary school art classes, the first time I started painting was one class my senior year of high school. And then I took a printmaking class in my undergraduate, and then when I was at graduate school, I started watercolor painting. And I also took on a really big acrylic project, a big like hyper-realistic project, which was funny for someone who's never done hyper-realism. And that was successful. So I really started painting as a hobby back in 2013, but painting things that are more meaningful to me probably starting last year, so 2019. There was also a really big gap, probably from 2014 or so back through 2019, where I wasn't painting much at all. I moved a few times and life got in the way and I wasn't painting. So last year is really when I broke the paints out again. So back in the spring of 2020, I took some time off of work because of COVID-19, and so I started listening to a podcast on true crime, if you will. And I was saddened at the magnitude and the frequency of the crimes committed, particularly against specific ethnicities or genders. Like over and over, I was hearing the same type of victim, if you will. So I started to dig into the issues facing Indigenous women, and it really broke my heart. So, there were, hundreds, if not thousands, of missing and murdered women, and why hadn't I heard of any of this before, especially as I'm a woman? Like, why have I gone through 29 years of life without hearing any of that? So I wanted to bring attention to what was happening and what has happened to them, hoping, for eventual change. So I originally wanted to enter a piece in an international exhibit in a contest to help raise like global awareness. But I wasn't able to submit the piece that I ended up doing because I had used graphite as well to sketch out my subjects, and it was a watercolor only, so no graphite. So I wasn't able to submit it. So I'm a diehard believer in justice and fighting for what's right. So my plan is to raffle off the painting of the 5 women to raise funds for more testing through the DNA Doe project. And like, while I enjoy painting things like flowers, like I would like my art to be able to help start and kind of reawaken that narrative that I think is so important. So I think artists can change a little bit about what some of the world cares about, what they focus on. If we as artists can get people to feel things with our art, to connect to things in our art, or whether that's remembering past experiences, good or bad, whether that's kind of creating some tangible representation of an ideology or an ideal or a feeling. If artists can create something like that, can create a tangible connection to an idea, then it's almost like the movie Inception. Like you're planting a seed, you're planting a thought. So for me, one of my favorite paintings I've ever seen is a really fabulous watercolor that kind of depicts the need for kind of environmental conservation and kind of how close we are to kind of not being able to go back. So it's just a still life, but the things that are represented in the still life kind of connected with me and my viewpoint so much that I frequently think about that painting, even though I don't yet own a print of it. But, it's something I see and I feel, and it's a concise, tangible, typically visual representation of kind of even a big concept like that. So I need to be careful when I am painting subjects that I'm really emotionally attached to. It's really difficult to see these pictures of people, of women who have been hurt or are gone without answers, and try to just get not sucked in to that feeling, to that overwhelming feeling. So there are times that I will wait for another piece, another story, they're not stories, they're true, but until something hits me so hard that I have to paint it. And then when I paint it, I'm proud of it, and I'm not upset by it. And I want to show people and I want them to ask, who are these women, and, why did you paint this in all red, and, the heck is up with that, and stuff like that. And like, I have ideas for a couple pieces that are like a couple events that are really memorable and that are really seared in my head, and I haven't figured out the right way to express them yet. So I think it's healthy for me to stand up for people that I can stand up for. I'm empowered, so I want to be able to use my voice to bring awareness to things. And it doesn't, at least yet, become too much. But I don't have a goal of painting like every single person that's gone missing under scary circumstances, because that would be very overwhelming. But there's particular stories, particular places where things took place, or larger concepts, like highways that have been named after groups of murdered women. Like, that's insane to me that happens. But so I'm able to kind of put it down as I need to, but I think it's somewhat cathartic for me, because I feel like I'm able to, I'm able to start conversations, and I don't think change happens without conversation. So I think it makes me feel like I'm doing something good. So the COVID-19 epidemic up in kind of the Northeast was pretty serious, is still serious, especially back in March and April. And that really helped me refocus on kind of what I want to do with, especially with my art, so that was where I really transitioned from painting orchids to, okay, can I do something more meaningful? What are the, what work can I make that has the loudest voice? Like, yes, flowers are nice, but no one's gonna start a conversation over a painting of an orchid, probably. But maybe I can use it's kind of like a newfound purpose, and putting people and people's stories and the need for change is more important than just painting pretty things. So yeah, COVID definitely helped me to kind of restructure my priorities, especially when it comes to what I paint. And like the kind of animal conservation series that I've started, that was born out of COVID times too. Because if we lose things, if we lose animals, like I did a painting of a panda. Like, how would you express a panda? Like, let's say pandas were gone, and in 100 years you had to explain to someone what a panda looked like. Like, how would you even show that? Like, so, basically trying to highlight things before it's too late. I think that's been a big lesson from 2020 anyway. So if my life to date was a book, the title would probably be something like "Seriously?" with question marks, or kind of like "Watch this." I don't know. I've never been asked that question. I have a few people have hopefully jokingly suggested that I should write a book about my life, but I don't think anyone would want to read that. Yeah, I've lived through a lot, good and bad. So, but everyone has. We all have stories. So if people are interested in following more about kind of current artistic projects, kind of what's currently on canvas or paper, they can follow my Instagram at Rachel Lemcke Art, Rachel Lem as in marble, CKE Art. I also have a Facebook page with the same name, Rachel Lemcke Art, but I am more active on my Instagram. I tend to not post a lot of like works in progress and stuff like that on my Facebook page, but I don't post pictures of all of my works in progress. Some of them never make it out of the studio, but other times I definitely will share what I'm working on, as well as past completed pieces in all sorts of mediums. So I currently have a couple projects that I'm working on. One is the next piece in the kind of animal conservation series. So it is going to be two size matched 15 by 30 acrylic paintings. One will be of a jellyfish and the other will be of a balloon. Not a huge fan of balloons because they end up out in nature, not where they're supposed to be. So I want to see if I can kind of artistically render a balloon and a jellyfish to kind of look a little similar. But that's a kind of experimental work in progress. And then I have some sketches and some ideas going for a piece about what's happened up at Gilgo Beach, Gilgo Beach, and Oak Beach, out in New York State, near Long Island. These were sites of I don't know how to phrase this delicately. So there were sites where victims were found from one or two kind of scary serial killers. So they're like really marshy islands with not a lot on them. They're like really, like those parts are really kind of desolate, and someone kind of almost left trophies there for them, but they're people with lives and families and friends and stories. So I'm still trying to figure out a way to highlight the people and as they were, and their contributions to the world, and not just their status as a victim. So that's a really sensitive line and portrayal. You know, yes, these people will be grouped together because of kind of how things ended, but I want to really highlight kind of who they were and what their stories were before that. So those are two very different works in progress at the moment. My advice to any artists out there who might be struggling is, the first thing is find what motivates you with art. Not selling pieces, not something that basic, but what, you know, basically paint what you feel, and try to get people to connect to what you're painting and to what you're trying to show, what you're trying to kind of bring to the surface of humanity. You know, so I paint in watercolors, paint with watercolors and acrylics and some mixed media, and good supplies go a long way. Kind of depends what medium you're in. But there's a big difference in watercolor paper. There's a big difference in paint quality. There's a big difference in brushes, you know, all sorts of things like that. But what you're trying to show, the heart of the work will come through. If it kind of has grabbed you as the artist as much, to kind of stand out in your mind, if you can make that come through and kind of get that feeling out on canvas or out on paper, then the quality of your supplies is kind of secondary. That huge, you know, another piece of advice is don't give up. That might sound weird, but that piece that I did with the 5 indigenous women, it's in reds and red, one shade of red, and black. There was something wrong with that watercolor paper. I don't know if it was the sizing, but 2/3 of that painting area was, the paper was totally corrupted. But I thought it was important enough as a subject that I had already started, and I thought it was going well enough that I wanted to continue. So is it the most technically sound? No. Am I fantastic at figure drawing? No. Portraits? No. But my heart was in it, so that's why it worked. So kind of throw your heart into something, and people will see that. You know, that's I think the biggest piece of advice I could give to someone.